The phone was heavy and cold in Cashin Thorne's hand, a sudden, intrusive weight against the polished mahogany of his CEO desk. It had only been 5 months since the divorce, 5 months since the ink dried on the legal papers that severed him from Serafina Vance, and now this. His sleek, glass-walled office, overlooking the frenetic, expensive heart of Manhattan, usually offered a perfect shield from the messiness of the outside world, but this call had punctured his fortress completely. The voice on the other end was a calm, professional lawyer, but the words she delivered were pure, shocking chaos, tearing through the quiet afternoon like a siren. Serafina, the brilliant, emotionally resilient black woman from Charleston, South Carolina, whom he had once loved and then ruthlessly discarded, had struck back from the grave of their marriage. Mr. Thorne, Serafina has confirmed she is pregnant. She has asked me to formally notify you that she is carrying your child. The voice was measured, yet Cashin could feel a surge of pure, white-hot fury, a sensation he usually reserved for losing a major acquisition, flood his system. This was not a business deal. This was a calculated, devastating emotional attack. Cashin Thorne, the 39-year-old, emotionally cold, white billionaire CEO, who valued control above all else, felt his foundation cracking. He slammed his fist down on the desk, the sound muffled by the thick, expensive wood, but loud enough to make his assistant flinch outside the closed door. "That is impossible," he snarled into the receiver, his tone a dangerous whisper that promised swift, brutal retribution. "We have been divorced for 5 months. We haven't been in the same room since the final decree. She is trying to bleed me dry. This is a pathetic attempt at extortion, and I will ruin her for it." His mind raced, calculating the dates, attempting to solve the mystery of the timeline that made the lawyer's claims seem absurd on the surface, but chillingly plausible underneath. The lawyer's calmness only fueled his rage. She had clearly dealt with angry billionaires before. The dates confirmed she became pregnant approximately 1 month before the divorce was finalized. "Mr. Thorne, as the baby's presumed father, she is initiating legal proceedings for child support and establishing paternity." Cashin remembered the bitter final weeks of their marriage, the sterile, emotionally distant cohabitation, punctuated by one final, catastrophic attempt at reconciliation before everything truly imploded. A deep, cold dread began to mix with his anger as he realized the exact time frame she was referencing. The audacity of Serafina to use that moment of vulnerability, that single, desperate night of finality, to secure her revenge was breathtaking. He ended the call, without another word, tossing the phone onto the plush carpet as if it were contaminated. He stood, his expensive suit feeling suddenly too tight, and stared out at the city he owned. This was more than a financial threat. It was a threat to his carefully constructed identity as the cold, rational, unscathed billionaire. He had thought the divorce had been clean, but Serafina had clearly walked away with a secret, a time bomb ticking inside her. The mystery of the timeline and the chilling confidence of her lawyer demanded an immediate, ruthless response, starting with confirming whether he was truly capable of being betrayed this completely. The echoes of the lawyer's claims still throbbed in Cashin's mind, a physical ache that he couldn't numb with power or money. He spun around, confronting the one person who shouldn't have been there, the one who now looked like a dangerous liability. His current fiancée, Penelope. She had entered the office silently, drawn by the muffled sound of his fury, and her face, usually a mask of poised indifference, was now tight with a suspicion that cut him deeper than the divorce. Penelope, a calculating socialite accustomed to securing her position with precision, fixed him with cold, steely eyes, demanding to know who Serafina was and why a pregnancy timeline could possibly involve him after their own relationship had solidified. "Don't insult me, Cashin," Penelope hissed, her voice barely audible but carrying a chilling force. "We were together long before the divorce was final. If she claims she got pregnant before the decree, that means you were sleeping with her after you were supposedly committed to me. You cheated on me with the woman you claimed you hated." The accusation was technically true in the blurred, overlapping timeline of his messy breakup and swift re-engagement, but he denied it with a vehemence that was purely self-preservation, knowing that Penelope's loyalty was as conditional as his net worth. He raged, not just at Serafina, but at the situation, driving a sudden, severe conflict into the foundation of his new engagement. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in a modest, sun-dappled apartment in a quieter corner of Atlanta, Serafina sat alone, her hand resting gently on the small, but unmistakably forming curve of her abdomen. She wasn't consumed by anger or revenge. Instead, a quiet, almost unsettling determination settled over her. The expensive mahogany and Manhattan skyline were gone, replaced by the simple, comforting scent of fresh-cut flowers and the silence of a life she was building for herself. She was no longer Mrs. Thorne, the gilded captive. She was Serafina Vance, charting a path forward, and the life growing inside her gave her a strength she hadn't known she possessed during the turmoil of her marriage. She picked up the framed photograph of her mother, Thelma, and her expression softened with resolve. Serafina opened her journal, flipping back through the meticulous notes she kept on her post-divorce life. The dates, the appointments, the brief, intense relationship she had pursued immediately after the decree was finalized. She paused at a specific entry, confirming the exact date, which complicated the paternity claim completely. The date of her final, desperate attempt at intimacy with Cashin, and the dates of her subsequent, short-lived freedom. The dates were tight, confusing, and offered the shadow of a doubt she knew Cashin would exploit, but she was prepared to face the complexity honestly. Back in New York, Cashin's private investigator, Gideon, a man whose loyalty was bought with exorbitant retainer fees, called with his first report. The news was calculatedly delivered, but the underlying truth was disturbing to the billionaire. Mr. Thorne, she's not hiding. She sold her engagement ring, paid off her mother's pension debt. She's not spending the settlement money. She's living quietly, professionally, working remote. But there's a man. Serafina has been seeing Elias Vance, your former head of security, frequently and intensely since the divorce. The revelation of Elias, the one man Cashin trusted with his safety, now potentially sharing Serafina's life, and potentially, the paternity, slammed into Cashin. The knowledge that Serafina had moved on so quickly, and with his own man, was an unbearable affront and a clear signal of deeper betrayal. The name Elias Vance, spat out by Gideon over the encrypted line, felt like a bullet to Cashin's pride. Not only was Serafina pregnant, but she had apparently coupled with the one man whose discretion and loyalty Cashin had paid millions to secure. The thought of Elias, the quiet, capable professional who was 39, now touching Serafina and possibly fathering the child she carried, ignited a new, scorching wave of hatred. Cashin saw the situation not as a matter of paternity, but as a deliberate, two-pronged betrayal. The extreme event of Elias's involvement solidified Cashin's narrative. Serafina was lying, and this entire pregnancy was an elaborate, spiteful setup. He ordered Gideon to intensify the surveillance on Elias, to find any proof of a financial connection or a secret plan between the former lovers, determined to dismantle their fabricated story and expose Serafina's deceit to the world. Far away from the venom and fury of the corporate world, Serafina sat in a sterile, brightly lit obstetrician's office in Atlanta, the atmosphere a welcome contrast to the dark drama swirling around her. The less extreme event of her appointment was a moment of quiet serenity and focus. She listened intently as the doctor outlined the care plan for the coming months, discussing nutrition and preparations for a healthy, single-parent future. She found a strange, centering peace in the clinical details, realizing that this tiny life was her future, untainted by the bitterness of the past. The quiet resolve in her eyes spoke of a woman who had already weathered the worst and was now solely focused on protecting this new beginning, even if it meant fighting a financial war against a billionaire titan. She declined the doctor's offer to contact Cashin, stating simply, "I have notified the necessary parties, doctor. I will handle the rest." Serafina knew the fight was inevitable, but she refused to let his toxic influence touch the sanctity of this stage of her life. She left the office feeling not vulnerable, but empowered, drawing strength from the growing life inside her. Her plan was not to beg, but to stand firm on the truth, whatever the test might reveal. However, Cashin's paranoia and rage had not been sitting idle. Acting on a cruel impulse, he dispatched a team of his legal enforcers to Charleston, South Carolina, Serafina's childhood home. The new extreme event was the cruelest maneuver yet, targeting the person Serafina loved and protected most, her mother, Thelma Vance. Cashin knew Thelma had recently retired, relying heavily on a modest pension and her small, paid-off home. His team cornered Thelma outside her community center, presenting her with a chilling, legally worded document. The message was clear, delivered with a casual cruelty that only extreme wealth can confer. Cashin would use his vast resources to initiate a predatory lawsuit against Thelma's pension fund and her property, inventing a dozen legal pretexts, unless Serafina publicly and immediately signed an affidavit disavowing his paternity and agreeing to a total non-disclosure agreement. The threat was a direct, devastating strike against Serafina's lifeline, forcing her to choose between the safety of her mother and the truth of her child's parentage. The sound of her mother's voice, usually a warm, steady melody, was fragmented and desperate when Thelma finally called Serafina. This was the extreme event Serafina had feared most, the collateral damage of Cashin's relentless malice. "Serafina, please, you have to stop this." Thelma wept into the phone, her breathing ragged. "They were here. Cashin's lawyers. They said they would freeze my pension. They would tie up the house in court for years, until I had nothing left. They said I'd end up in one of those dreadful homes. I can't fight him, sweet girl. Please, just sign whatever he wants. Lie for me. Tell them it's not his." Thelma's plea wasn't born of selfishness, but of profound, protective fear, sacrificing her daughter's dignity for her own security. Hearing her mother, the rock of her life, reduced to this state of terror, ignited a cold, righteous fury in Serafina. Later that evening, the immediate crisis paused. Serafina sat quietly, letting the memory of the past wash over her. The less extreme event was a necessary reflection, bringing clarity to the rot at the core of her failed marriage. She recalled the final fight, the one that had broken the last threads of their connection. It wasn't about money, it was about respect. Cashin had scoffed at Serafina's suggestion of retiring her mother early, dismissing Thelma's lifetime of work as chump change and speaking with casual, sweeping generational disrespect toward Serafina's entire family background. "People like that don't retire, Serafina. They just stop working when they run out of steam," he had sneered, immediately following it up by reviewing the strict, ironclad prenup, reiterating how little she would walk away with. It was then, in that moment of casual cruelty and financial dominance, that she realized she hadn't just married a rich man, but a person fundamentally incapable of empathy. That memory, the sting of his disdain, hardened Serafina's resolve. Cashin had targeted her mother's vulnerability, but in doing so, he had underestimated Serafina's own capacity for strategic warfare. She realized that trying to argue fairness or morality with him was useless. She had to speak his language, power and consequence. The new extreme event was Serafina's calculated decision to stop running. She wouldn't back down or lie. Instead, she contacted her lawyer, not to negotiate, but to issue a demand for an immediate, official meeting. Serafina was going to confront Cashin directly, but she wasn't going to plead. She was going to use his own maliciousness, the fact that he had attacked her family, to force his hand, preparing a shocking reveal of her own that she knew would shatter his veneer of control and expose the depth of his cruelty to those who mattered most. The air in the reception area of Cashin's corporate tower was thick with the scent of money and intimidation, but Serafina walked through it with cool, unshakable confidence. This was the extreme event, her unannounced arrival, a direct invasion of his highly controlled domain. She bypassed his stunned assistant and marched directly into his opulent office, interrupting a high-level meeting. Serafina stood before him, the slight swell of her abdomen visible beneath her tailored dress, her eyes blazing with the resolve Cashin hadn't seen since she walked out the door 5 months ago. She didn't shout or plead. She simply laid a pre-drafted legal document on his desk, signed and notarized. "Stop the threats against my mother, Cashin. I'm done with your games. We are settling this now. Arrange for an immediate, verifiable DNA test at a neutral facility, today, or I will file a public injunction against your holding company by the end of the hour." The tension in the room was palpable, the silence broken only by the whir of the air conditioning. Cashin, stunned by her audacity and the sudden, public nature of the challenge, knew he couldn't refuse without appearing guilty. The less extreme event was the uneasy lull that followed. The testing was arranged, the samples taken under strict supervision. They were forced to wait for the analysis, occupying separate corners of a sterile, private lab lounge, a temporary, fragile truce. Cashin attempted to revert to his usual manipulation tactics. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost seductive in its professional charm. "Serafina, look at the life you could have. Forget the drama. I'll quadruple the settlement. A trust fund for the child that makes you untouchable. You walk away with peace, and I walk away with silence. You know this world will chew you up." He was offering her a golden cage, a final attempt to buy her off. But Serafina merely looked at him, recognizing the desperate hunger for control behind his offer. "It's not about the money anymore, Cashin. It's about the truth. I will wait for the results." As the afternoon dragged into evening, the promised call finally came. The new extreme event arrived in the form of a grave, unsettling voice on the speakerphone. It wasn't a lab technician. It was the director of genetic services, Mr. Thorne, Ms. Vance. "The results are conclusive, but they carry a unique medical and legal complexity that prevents us from delivering the full report over the phone. Due to the high-profile nature of this case and the potential legal ramifications, the full findings must be delivered in person to both parties simultaneously, with a legal representative present. The director's formality and the hint of complexity, far from clearing the air, only shrouded the truth in a thicker, more terrifying mystery. Serafina glanced at Cashin. His face was a mask of cold fear, the fear of an outcome he could not buy, twist, or control. The tension from the laboratory was still humming in the air when the next extreme event materialized. Elias Vance, the former head of Cashin's security and Serafina's brief, intense post-divorce lover, appeared abruptly outside her apartment building. He looked worn, his usual professional composure frayed by worry. He immediately ushered her into a secluded alcove, his voice low and urgent. "Serafina, you're being tracked. Cashin has had Gideon on your trail since the first call, and now that the DNA results are complicated, he'll escalate. I know his tactics, and I know his vulnerabilities. I should have come forward sooner, but I was afraid." He confessed his guilt, revealing his deep regret over not intervening earlier in her marriage and for having inadvertently involved her in their brief relationship that clouded the paternity issue. "Let me help you. I can protect you and the baby. I owe you that much." The unexpected reappearance of Elias and his offer of protection presented a difficult, less extreme event for Serafina, a profound moral and emotional dilemma. She looked at Elias, remembering the genuine kindness in his eyes, a stark contrast to Cashin's cold manipulation. He was capable, reliable, and knew the inner workings of Cashin's empire better than anyone. Accepting his help meant immediate, professional security, a vital resource against a ruthless opponent. However, it also meant introducing a significant complication into the legal battle. If Cashin's team could prove Elias was still intimately involved in her life, it would undoubtedly fuel the narrative that she was unsure of the baby's father, turning the legal complexity of the DNA results into a public spectacle of deceit. She wrestled with the need for safety versus the need for a clean legal fight, ultimately deciding that the immediate protection of her child outweighed the potential messiness of Cashin's smears. Meanwhile, Cashin was attempting to implement a contingency plan, an immediate flight to his secure compound in the Caymans to organize his defense from outside U.S. jurisdiction. That plan was brutally shut down by the new extreme event. As he stepped onto the tarmac toward his Gulfstream jet, his corporate counsel received an emergency notification. A surprise legal injunction had been issued, grounding his corporate jet and freezing movement of funds tied to a massive, previously hidden, company asset. Serafina, during her time as his wife, had subtly observed and mentally cataloged many of Cashin's less-than-transparent holdings, and she had passed on the strategic information to her legal team. This targeted strike, crippling his ability to escape and cutting off his immediate cash flow, was a masterful countermove, confirming to Cashin that Serafina was no longer the naive woman he married. She was playing to win, using his own secrets as weapons against him. The moment the director of genetic services, accompanied by a small legal team, stepped into the secure meeting room, the atmosphere turned glacial. This was the promised extreme event, the moment of truth that held a terrifying complication. The director, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Hayes, opened the file and began to speak with careful, clinical precision. "The primary testing is conclusive. Mr. Thorne, the probability of paternity is indeed $99.9%. You are the biological father of the child." Cashin's jaw tightened in furious denial, while a wave of protective relief washed over Serafina. But Dr. Hayes immediately delivered the twist. However, due to a rare, non-standard fertility treatment Ms. Vance underwent during the marriage, a treatment that Mr. Thorne insisted upon, the legal and medical interpretation of that remaining $0.1% doubt leaves the door ajar for challenge. The treatment, a form of induced hyperovulation, introduced a statistical anomaly we have to acknowledge. The certainty of paternity was established, yet the existence of that tiny, manufactured shadow of doubt was now a legal weapon Cashin could wield. As Elias stood guard outside, ensuring their privacy, Serafina allowed her mind to drift back to the nadir of her marriage, a necessary, less extreme event of reflection. She remembered finding a digitized file hidden deep within Cashin's cloud storage, encrypted with the forgotten anniversary date. It contained his 5-year freedom plan, a blueprint for his early retirement. The cruelest discovery in the document was his cold, strategic plan involving his aging, estranged father, Bernard Thorne, a man now 70 and residing in a struggling, underfunded nursing home upstate. The plan detailed cutting off the meager supplemental payments Cashin currently provided, citing the need to consolidate assets before his final acquisition. Serafina realized then that Cashin's emotional coldness wasn't just directed at her. It was a deep, generational affliction. The pain in that memory was a dull ache compared to the present conflict, but it provided crucial context about Cashin's capacity for familial betrayal. Later that evening, after the high-stakes meeting, Serafina found a small, unmarked courier package tucked securely beneath her mail slot. This was the new extreme event, an anonymous, cryptic delivery. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were two items: a single, tarnished brass key, which looked like it belonged to an old lockbox, and a faded, crinkled photograph. The photo showed a much younger, smiling Cashin, perhaps 10 years old, standing awkwardly beside a man with a tired, kind face. His father, Bernard. There was a faded inscription on the back: "The most important vault is the one you forget you own." The message was a silent summons, a hint that a secret lay buried, connected to Cashin's past, and perhaps his greatest weakness. Serafina knew she had to follow this fragile thread of evidence, realizing that her fight wasn't just about a baby anymore. It was about exposing the rot at the foundation of the Thorn Empire. The weight of the tarnished brass key in Serafina's hand felt heavier than any gold Cashin had ever given her. Following the cryptic clue, Serafina and Elias, maintaining a cautious distance to avoid detection, traced the key's intricate carving to a discreet, old-fashioned downtown bank Cashin rarely used. This was the extreme event, the opening of a Pandora's box. The key fit a dusty, forgotten safety deposit box. Inside, they found no grand jewels, but something far more valuable: a trove of Cashin's deepest secrets. There were meticulously detailed ledgers documenting decades of secret, illegal business dealings, shell corporations, tax evasion schemes, and illicit payoffs, all designed to shield his true wealth from regulatory scrutiny. Alongside the ledgers lay a copy of his father's, Bernard Thorn's, last known will, which contained surprising provisions Cashin had deliberately ignored. This discovery was a devastating weapon, proving Serafina was not only the mother of his child, but the potential holder of the power to dismantle his empire. Later that week, driven by a growing sense of empathy and the need to understand the source of Cashin's coldness, Serafina visited Bernard at the underfunded nursing home upstate. The less extreme event was a quiet, emotionally taxing encounter. Bernard was frail and mostly non-communicative, but when Serafina sat beside him, gently adjusting his blanket, his eyes focused. In a moment of unexpected clarity, he mistook her for his late wife. His voice, thin and reedy, offered a poignant piece of marital advice, meant for a ghost but delivered to Serafina. "Don't let the money chill your heart, my dear. I did, and I lost everything that mattered." The brief, unburdened confession offered Serafina a glimpse into the tragic history of the Thorn family, affirming that Cashin's emotional void was a toxic legacy passed down, making her more resolute in breaking the cycle. Back in Cashin's penthouse, the new extreme event was the swift, opportunistic turn of betrayal. Penelope, Cashin's fiancée, whose suspicion had been mounting since Serafina's initial call, overheard a panicked, hushed phone conversation between Cashin and his most trusted, shady accountant. Penelope didn't catch every word, but she heard enough: mentions of offshore funds, missing ledgers, and the name Bernard, to confirm that Cashin's empire was built on a foundation of sand and crime. Calculating and motivated by her own self-preservation, Penelope realized her future with Cashin was now less secure than his prison sentence. She saw her chance to secure a massive personal payout by leveraging the illegal information. Penelope quietly began documenting everything she could find, deciding to exploit Cashin's ruin for her own revenge and profit. The air crackled with cold, transactional malice when Penelope, Cashin's calculating fiancée, finally made contact with Serafina. This was the extreme event, a betrayal within a betrayal. They met in a neutral, upscale hotel lounge, far from the prying eyes of Cashin's security. Penelope didn't mince words. She was strictly business. She slid a sleek, encrypted USB drive across the table, containing a digitized copy of Cashin's most damning illegal business records, the exact evidence that could put him in prison and destroy his corporation. "This is everything you need to win," Penelope stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "It proves the shell companies, the tax fraud, and the cover-ups. My price is simple: a hefty, silent payment, secured in an anonymous trust, enough to ensure my comfortable future once the Thorn Empire implodes. I walk away clean, and you get your leverage." Serafina felt a chilling mix of disgust and grim satisfaction, accepting the documents as a necessary evil in her fight for justice. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of her apartment, the less extreme event was the methodical assembly of the evidence. Serafina and Elias spread the digital files across a secure tablet, cross-referencing Penelope's documents with the ledgers, and were found in Bernard's safety deposit box. Hours slipped by as they built a cohesive, undeniable case. Serafina's initial shock gave way to a hardened understanding of the sheer scale of Cashin's corruption. She realized the fight was no longer a messy divorce proceeding. It was a battle against systemic greed. Elias, seeing the depth of the rot and Serafina's unwavering resolve, felt a renewed sense of purpose, recognizing that her fight was truly righteous. The scale of the task ahead was immense, but the truth they held was now unassailable. Cashin, alerted to the missing documents and sensing the walls closing in, reacted with frantic, desperate rage. The new extreme event was his counterassault in the court of law. Panicking, he immediately hired Rex Sterling, a notoriously aggressive, high-profile lawyer known for his scorched earth tactics. Within hours, Sterling filed a devastating legal motion, a claim that Serafina was mentally unfit to parent. The motion cited her erratic emotional state, the stress of the recent divorce, and her inability to provide a stable, non-vindictive environment for the child, cleverly twisting her recent emotional turmoil and the necessary stress of their battle into legal evidence of instability. It was a vicious, personal attack designed to seize control of the child and silence her by questioning her sanity and fitness as a mother. The digital shrapnel from Rex Sterling's legal filing exploded across every major tabloid and gossip blog. This was the extreme event, a vicious, calculated attack in the court of public opinion. Under the sensational headline, Billionaire's ex-wife deemed unfit, evidence of instability and emotional turmoil, the stories ran heavily edited snippets of Serafina's private medical records. The narrative, carefully crafted by Sterling, painted Serafina as a volatile, unstable woman whose pregnancy claim was merely a stress-induced delusion, rendering her dangerous to herself and the child. The ensuing media firestorm was brutal and suffocating. Paparazzi camped outside her apartment, and anonymous sources fueled the baseless accusations, momentarily silencing her true legal complaints beneath a deafening wave of public doubt and judgment. In the midst of the chaos, Serafina found her anchor. The less extreme event was the arrival of her mother, Thelma Vance, who flew in from Charleston, cutting through the noise with the quiet dignity of a Southern matriarch. Thelma didn't bring apologies or weakness. She brought stoic, unflinching support. "We don't crumble under pressure, Serafina. We stand up taller," Thelma declared, her voice firm. "He attacked my pension, and now he attacks your character. This is about more than money. This is about our name, our legacy. You fight this not just for yourself, but for your child to know they have a mother who stood against a giant and won." Thelma's presence was a shield, a reminder that Serafina's true strength came from roots Cashin could never buy or break. Refusing to be buried by the lies, Serafina decided to strike back on Cashin's own turf. The new extreme event took place at a highly publicized charity gala, a glitzy, high society event Cashin had forced Serafina to host annually when they were married. With Elias watching from the perimeter, Serafina made a surprise, breathtaking entrance. Dressed impeccably, showing both her resilience and the clear truth of her pregnancy, she walked directly to the stage as Cashin, flanked by Penelope and Sterling, watched in stunned silence. Taking the microphone, Serafina didn't deny the tabloid claims. She addressed them head-on. She announced the legal battle, confirmed the DNA results, and then, her voice ringing with clarity, she exposed the true nature of the fight. "My former husband's lawyer claims I am unstable because I experienced stress during a divorce he initiated. Let me tell you what truly destabilizes a woman: witnessing corruption, experiencing generational disrespect, and watching a powerful man try to destroy her mother. I am not unstable. I am standing for truth, and I will see this through." The room erupted into a stunned, divided murmur, shattering Cashin's carefully curated image of the wrong billionaire. The clip of Serafina's defiant speech at the gala didn't just trend. It went violently, globally viral. This was the extreme event that Cashin truly feared: the loss of his carefully constructed reputation, and more importantly, the trust of his major investors. The most immediate and dangerous consequence came in the form of a chilling phone call from Silas Albright, a sharp, 65-year-old titan of industry who was not only Cashin's primary investor but his godfather. Silas demanded an immediate, closed-door meeting. His voice, usually warm and paternal, was laced with cold fury. "Explain this media circus, Cashin. Your stock is volatile. Your ethics are public. If you cannot offer a clear, legal path to contain this mess and secure the company, I will pull my funding. You know what that means for Thorn Global. It means ruin. The threat was existential, forcing Cashin to face the reality that his personal vendetta was now jeopardizing the empire itself. While Cashin scrambled to placate his godfather, Elias watched Serafina manage the fallout of the media storm, fielding calls, coordinating with her legal team, and protecting her growing child with a fierce, unwavering dignity. Seeing her strength finally broke his own secrecy. The less extreme event was a heavy, emotional confession. Elias pulled Serafina aside, his voice thick with guilt and shame. Serafina, there's something you need to know about the beginning. I wasn't just your head of security. I was initially hired by Cashin to spy on you before the divorce. He wanted leverage, proof of infidelity, anything to keep the settlement low. He revealed his deepest secret, confessing how the assignment backfired. He hadn't found malice. He had found genuine, quiet innocence and kindness, and in the process, he had fallen completely in love with the woman Cashin was trying to frame. He told her, I watched you, and I realized he was the monster, not you. I started protecting you long before I ever stepped forward. I beg your forgiveness. Elias's painful confession, though shocking, only reinforced Serafina's commitment to exposing the truth. She was prepared for treachery, but she was now armed with the timeline of his deception. Serafina immediately passed the information to her legal team, who were already on the offensive. The new extreme event came via a triumphant call from her lawyer. While reviewing the vast paper trail of the marriage, they found a critical, exploitable loophole. The documentation surrounding the rare fertility treatment, the one Cashin had insisted upon, and which introduced the $0.1% doubt, contained a minor, yet legally significant, administrative error related to spousal consent and financial responsibility. Because Cashin's paperwork was flawed, it technically voided the financial clauses of the prenuptial agreement specifically concerning child support and future medical needs. This single clerical error meant Serafina was now legally entitled to demand significantly more than the paltry sum Cashin had mandated, transforming the fight from a claim for modest support to a potentially massive division of his wealth. The news broke on the financial wires before it even hit the gossip columns. This was the extreme event that represented the true power shift in the legal battle. Serafina's legal team, acting swiftly on the voided prenup clause, publicly filed an amended motion that shook the very foundations of Cashin's wealth. The new demand for child support was no longer a negotiation. It was an ultimatum, leveraging the flawed legal document to effectively demand a settlement amount equivalent to nearly half of Cashin's personal, non-corporate fortune. The public filing, citing the specific clerical error tied to the fertility treatment Cashin had insisted upon, laid bare his recklessness and hypocrisy. Analysts immediately downgraded Thorn Global's outlook, recognizing that the billionaire was facing not just a divorce, but potential financial decapitation, a consequence that sent Cashin spiraling into panic. Facing ruin and unable to rely on his usual corporate buffers, Cashin was forced into a desperate, humiliating move. The less extreme event saw him make a pilgrimage to the upstate nursing home to see his estranged father, Bernard. Cashin, swallowing his considerable pride, entered the underfunded facility, not to offer comfort or reconciliation, but to seek a strategic alliance or, more accurately, a substantial loan to cover his rapidly accumulating legal expenses and stabilize his stock. He approached Bernard, his voice a strained parody of respect, attempting to appeal to some vestige of familial loyalty. Bernard, frail but utterly clear-minded, fixed his son with a gaze of cold finality. You built your empire on discarding people, Cashin. You discarded Serafina, and you discarded me. I have nothing for you. You will face the consequences of your own choices. The rejection was absolute, confirming Cashin's complete isolation. As Cashin retreated, defeated, Bernard called the nursing home manager, his eyes shining with purpose. He asked him to contact Serafina directly. This was the new extreme event, the final, devastating piece of leverage delivered from the unlikeliest source. Bernard, in a moment of sharp, protective lucidity, dictated a key piece of information to Serafina's lawyer, the details of a trust fund. It was an old, obscure fund, established decades ago by his grandfather, Cashin's great-grandfather, specifically for the first grandchild born into the Thorn line, a fund Cashin never knew existed and was structured outside his control. Bernard explained that the trust contained a fortune large enough not only to secure Serafina's child's future independently, but also enough to completely undercut Cashin's financial standing and his argument that she was only after his money. The existence of this secret, inherited trust fund, which Serafina now controlled as the mother of the beneficiary, meant she no longer needed Cashin's money, giving her ultimate moral and financial authority in the courtroom. The sterile silence of the hospital was shattered for Cashin by the news of the premature birth. All the calculations, the legal posturing, and the corporate threats evaporated, replaced by a consuming, visceral fear for the vulnerable life he had helped create. This was the extreme event. Cashin bypassed a security team and lawyer, finding a back corridor entrance to the hospital. He slipped into the hushed, darkened environment of the NICU, the ward of tiny, fragile fighters. He stood before the incubator, seeing his baby for the very first time. The sight of the minuscule infant, tethered to wires and breathing machines, hit him with a force no boardroom failure ever could. For a moment, he was just a scared, heartbroken man, witnessing the true cost of his emotional wreckage. He reached out a trembling hand, tracing the outline of the glass barrier that separated him from his child. The nurses, recognizing the renowned face, guided him discreetly to Serafina's private recovery room. Serafina awoke to find him standing there, not as the ruthless billionaire CEO, but as the subject of the less extreme event, a broken, tearful father. He didn't speak of lawyers or settlements. He simply sat, his shoulders slumped, confessing his fear and his realization of the magnitude of his mistakes. "I saw the baby," he whispered, his voice catching. "I don't care about the company, the money, or the fight, Serafina. I need that child to live. I destroyed everything, didn't I? I've wasted so much time. I was so blinded by pride. I couldn't see what truly mattered until this moment." His confession was raw and unvarnished, finally admitting the truth of his ruin and the hollowness of his pursuit of power. Serafina saw past the suit to the scared man beneath, recognizing a flicker of the humanity she had once married. The fragile piece of their shared fear was brutally shattered the next morning. The new extreme event occurred just outside the hospital's main entrance. As Elias stepped out briefly to grab coffee, he was surrounded by plainclothes officers and arrested on sight. The charges, Serafina's lawyer confirmed moments later, were old, trumped-up claims of corporate espionage and unauthorized data access, charges orchestrated months ago by Cashin's aggressive lawyer, Rex Sterling, and only activated now. It was a calculated, vicious move designed to strip Serafina of her immediate support system and leave her entirely vulnerable, a final, cruel attempt by Sterling to regain control of the narrative while Cashin was incapacitated by fear and guilt. Serafina was now alone, emotionally exhausted, with a premature baby, fighting for life, and her most trusted protector suddenly taken away.